The advertising industry was broken according to how I saw it, right? And I wanted to create a different type of culture. You know, a lot of talent was seeking a place where they would be heard, they would be understood, right? And that's the culture that we created. But our culture was very inclusive because we were very clear that we don't want to create a business that just speaks to the mass market, right? But we want to speak to a business that speaks to South Africans in their diversity as well as a continent in their diversity.
Zibusiso Mkhwanazi, thank you so much for your time. I think before we start getting into, the meat of the conversation, I am interested in knowing, before Avatar, before advertising, who is Zibusiso and what shaped your worldview and your relationship with ambition at a young age?
Okay, so Zibusiso, before advertising, is a father, is a husband. I do a lot of work in the community, and why I got into entrepreneurship was actually because of the background where I grew up, right? So it was to help out my mom with transport money because I used to use a train and a taxi to school, which was very expensive. And so I had to help out, and I started selling at a very young age. And from doing that, got exposed to, how businesses work. And it wasn't just selling of sweets, but I had to hire my first set of employees who were also selling sweets for me. So, it's understanding scaling as well. At a very young age, yeah.
Wow. And, take me back to starting, Avatar. What did you have, financially, skill-wise, or network? And what did you lack at the same time?
Yeah. Look, I think starting Avatar, I had the advantage that I had left a business that I was invested in before that. And interestingly enough, when we left that business, one of the clients with my former business partners that we spoke about that we would service was BCX at the time. And interestingly enough, the building that we were in was the headquarters of BCX. And I used to be in this building probably on a daily basis, right? So I started with a set of clients, and I just had to make sure that I service those clients well, and that's how Avatar grew.
And what was, the problem you were trying to fix when you entered in this market? What was the climate like, business-wise, in South Africa?
Yeah. So I'll talk to advertising in particular. The advertising industry is marked by, how can I say? I just didn't like the way people were treated in advertising, right? I thought, there's a better way of getting things done. Yeah. And I want to create a business that feels safe, a business that feels like a home away from home, and where people are a family, it's a very strong, creative culture, because the advertising industry, because of its pressures, it's known for drugs, it is known for just, a whole lot of problems. Yeah. And I wanted to go against the norm, and that's why I started Avatar. But as well, at the time when I started Avatar, there was this wave in the industry where, or let me say globally, where, in the past, what used to happen is that, you still have it today. You have a traditional agency, you've got a digital agency, et cetera, et cetera. So the business I belonged to before was a digital agency. Right. And I thought to myself, well, why do we not have radio agencies? Why do we not have TV agencies? Why do we have an agency that is centered around a single platform, because the consumer, when they consume advertising and media, they consume it as a whole. You know, they watch TV, they're on their phones, they listen to radio, they look at billboards. You know, this is an entire media landscape.
Right.
And I wanted to create a business then that could speak 360 to the entire landscape, right? Under one strategic umbrella. But in creating Avatar, what I quickly found out was the market wasn't ready for a business like mine, because the clients themselves, right, they were siloed, because they didn't know where to place us. Do they place us in the digital box, the traditional box, et cetera, et cetera? So we had a lot of education to do, you know, a lot of convincing to do, you know, and there were some brave clients that believed in us.
And where would you say at that stage, you know, because every business has a journey. It has, you know, its foundational phase where you're starting to figure things out. And then over time it grows. When did it feel like a business for you? And what was, you know, the first decision that made you feel like you are now like a real CEO?
And that's a very interesting question. I guess, you know, when you look at our first office, it was we were sharing an office with another business, and all there was just a table, right? And this other business just filled the room. And when we moved to our own space, which was in Rosebank, right, at the time. So it was a house that we converted into offices, you know, and having our logo on the wall and having a boardroom that I chose, and everyone's got offices. It just felt like, okay, I think this is real. I think this is now starting to become a real setup. But at the same time, it's the nature of clients that we are also starting to service, right? We were growing, you know, a list of corporate clients. You know, it just felt more and more real. Yeah.
And the weight of the responsibility.
Indeed. I mean, I think within 2 years in that building, we didn't have enough parking. People were parking on the streets and people's yards, and you know, so we went through those challenges, because every single year from 2012, I think up until 2012, let's say, up until 2020 or so, we grew at 100% year on year.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And what do you attribute to that? Because I think for a lot of young founders currently in this environment, you know, there's a lot of pressure, high unemployment, especially in South Africa. People are trying to figure out solutions, and some are forced and, you know, driven to entrepreneurship, not out of their own will, but out of survival. What makes you distinct in a market? What makes a business stand out? What keeps that client retention to a point where you're growing at 100% year on year?
I think it stems from how we started. You know, when I mentioned that when we started, we created an integrated agency from get-go. But when you looked at the landscape at the time, that didn't exist, right? Or if it did, it wasn't at a large scale. You know, it was taking off. And the reason why I had this insight is because, well, part of, you know, the honors or the privileges, I don't know what to call it, you know, but I was named as a Young Economic Forum Young Global Leader. And what that did, it afforded me the opportunity to attend Harvard and Yale. And so being in that environment and understanding the direction of the world, where it's going, right, from a media perspective, I was able to take some of the thinking, right, around where the world was going and come back to South Africa and become an early adopter of what the future was going to look like. So because we're an early adopter, then we're seen as mavericks, pioneers in the space, because you will never achieve growth like that if you seek to copy what is already there. It means that you need to redefine, think outside the box, innovate, impress clients, and that's what we were doing. A lot of people thought, because in terms of my industry, we were one of the first agencies that were black owned, right? A lot of people thought that was the reason, but that's not the reason, right? It's because we were innovating, we're thinking outside the box. We were, ahead of our time, when we started that business. So that's why then we became like hotcakes. We were selling like hotcakes.
You're selling like hotcakes on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward later, I mean, you built something quite profound.
Yeah.
And I think for the sake of this conversation and what this, conversation wants to sort of like, produce in terms of, an intellectual report, a case study, if you will. If you could walk us through Avatar's sort of like revenue model in terms of retainers, your project work, and pitching, making sales, retaining clients, how has that mix shifted over time, and how have you maintained growth in a volatile economic environment?
Yeah. Well, it's understanding a couple of things about the advertising business. And I'll start here. The advertising business, it's a people business. We don't have machines or outside of computers, but we don't manufacture anything. What we do is produce ideas, and ideas come from human beings. Machines are attempting to produce ideas, very poorly so, but you still need the human being brain. At the end of the day. Yeah. And if you need the human being to produce the best that they can, right? You as the employer need to ensure that the environment is the best environment that you can provide, which is the culture. It's the strong culture in the business. Now, why was that important for us? It's because I mentioned again, the advertising industry was broken according to how I saw it, right? And I wanted to create a different type of culture. And what that meant was that, people who were tired of not being heard and not being understood, because at times, you'll come up with an idea, that's a brilliant idea, but purely because of lack of transformation, your manager doesn't understand the idea because they don't have the cultural context of the idea, and it's bombed, right? And you'll come up with amazing work. So now, a lot of talent was seeking a place where they would be heard, they would be understood, right? And that's the culture that we created. But our culture was very inclusive because we were very clear that we don't want to create a business that just speaks to the mass market, right? But we want to speak to a business that speaks to South Africans in their diversity, as well as a continent in their diversity. And our culture was designed exactly like that, right? Centered around diversity. And then built on this culture is also then the understanding around how the dynamics of the industry work. Now, yes, you've got your retainer models, you've got your project, right? But retainers are very hard to come by. Projects you can get now. So how we've always viewed it is, projects pay the bills and retainers are your profit, right? So if you've got projects, it makes sure that your lights are on, et cetera, et cetera. So both are important for the model, because the danger with retainers is that you will get a large retainer, say 5 million rand or so retainer per month. And against that 5 million rand, you've employed 50 people, right? But because of the nature of our industry, that deal lasts, it's got a defined period of time. Once it's gone, right, many agencies have gone out of business that way, right? Because you don't have any projects to carry you if you lose a big retainer. that's when you go out of business.
Okay.
Right. So balancing the two is very important. But as well, the other way around, if you don't have retainers and you've just got projects, sometimes projects don't spend the type of money that one would like. So it's a fine and delicate balance between the two to manage, how you grow and to manage the risk.
And speaking about that very fine balance, how would you say strategically you go about acquiring and retaining clients?
Yes.
And for example, earlier on we were talking about pitches.
Yes.
And what do you do when you lose a pitch?
Yes. Okay. So it depends on the phase of the business, at what growth phase you're in. In startup mode, right, you take what you can. There's no, I'll work on this, I won't work on that. You just take what you can because you're in survival mode, right? You just need to make the bills, you just need to pay your people. And then you get to a point where you can kind of go, maybe let's stick with what we have. Let's not pitch so much. Mm-hmm. Then you get to the next point where you can choose what you want to work on, right? And this is when, once you've built your social capital, once you've built your brand, this is when a lot of clients want to work with you, right? Because they know what you're about. Yeah. So it depends on your growth phase.
Yeah.
And I'm going to speak maybe the first and the last one, because the middle one is kind of a mix of the two.
Yeah.
Right? In growth phase, acquiring clients, it's a whole song and dance, right? Mm-hmm. Because then you have to punch above your weight constantly, right? So I'll give you an example. My example for acquiring clients, I embraced the fact that I was an SMME at the time, right? But it was an SMME that is very capable of delivering. And what did it take for me to do that? Well, I had to embrace the fact that my competitors were very large dinosaurs that took forever just to get work out of the system, right? And I needed to be able to stand in front of a client or sit across them and say to them, listen, I am nimble. I'm involved in this business. When you talk to me, right, you're talking to me. I'll make sure it happens, right? Yes, keep your dinosaur on the side, right? But give me your work that you need fast turnaround on. So it was embracing the fact that I was an SMME at the same time. So that's how I grew into big brands. I wasn't the main agency, but I started small. How do you finish an elephant? Piece by piece. You just bite it piece by piece. And we started growing with those brands over time. And SAA is a good example of that, where we started with just a piece of the SAA business. Yeah. And within 5 years, when we exited that business, we're the global agency worldwide across all their markets.
Wow.
Right? And because we were biting piece by piece, right? And we started as just their creative agency, and then our scope expanded to digital, social, managing their blogs while still doing their traditional as well, right? Mm-hmm. Now you get to the other side, when now you've matured, when you've become a matured business. Now everything is now very transactional. The story about me being there is very cute, but now it's transactional. It's about what is your delivery capacity, your AI capability, your awards, how are you structured, your case studies, what have you delivered, so I think talking about case studies, there's one case study that I'm really, really proud of, and I just want to...
Of course, go ahead.
It's not a brand, and that's the great thing. It's the country.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
So last year, we had the privilege of working on the global brand campaign for South African tourism. We had to turn this thing around in like a space of a month, right?
Is this, the famous Trevor Noah ad?
No.
Okay.
So this is post Trevor Noah.
Oh, right. This
is post Trevor Noah.
Yes.
Right. And so we produced this piece of work. So this was aimed for global markets. So that's why a lot of South Africans would have not seen it, but it was a global campaign.
Right.
Right. And from that campaign up until now, so now going into 2026, for the launch period, we have smashed every record there was at SAT in terms of visitors, like visitor arrivals. So like South Africa is on an all-time high at the moment, higher than before
tourism
COVID.
traffic.
Yeah,
I just saw the report on that.
Yeah.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. You know, and one of the things, of course, there's a number of factors in tourism, but one of the things, you know, that the minister was attributing was strong destination marketing. Now, as a business, then you ask, how did we get there, right? Well, when we produced the work, right, so it was people and machines together, right, where to even come with the line, come find your joy, like human beings. So there were a lot of iterations of this line, you know, because we didn't want to make it about Mpumalanga or, you know, everyone has got attractions, but we wanted to make it about a feeling of South Africa, you know, and finding yourself within the hustle and bustle, right? And that's how we came up with Come Find Your Joy. And we tested it, right, using AI. So we've got our own custom-built programs where we can actually test work. So we tested this thing, and we kind of went in Brazil, how will this be received? In Germany, et cetera, right? And we could tell how well the campaign was going to do before we actually launched it. So once we launched it, and now we're getting the results, the two are matching up.
That's
right?
Incredible.
So to get to that level, it's a lot of investment, it's a lot of sophistication, and you see now dealing with a business like us now, it's no longer, you know, you're not shooting from the hip here and hoping, you know what I mean?
You have to take calculated
That's
decisions.
Correct. And that's what clients are after.
Yeah.
You know, it's the agency that will take them to their next.
Yes.
Right. So as a big business, that's how we've maintained our growth, and that's how we continue to acquire new clients and acquire growth. You know, there are economic challenges. I mean, we face them like any other business, right? But how we keep on punching, you know, is ensuring that we're moving ahead of the curve all the time.
And you know, I don't imagine I know how many people you employ, but I would be interested because the next questions I want to speak about is about capital funding and risk.
Yeah.
You know, before we get into that, like when you lose a pitch, for example, I don't know when last time, what would be the real reason? What feedback do you normally get from clients?
Yes. Look, I'll talk about a recent pitch that I lost like now. And what was that reason? It was cost.
I was going to say that.
Right.
And how do you negotiate? Because a lot of I think founders, especially ones that are in the starting phase and in survival mode, is you always want to convince the client. You know, I can cut here. I can I can make myself more cheaper. How do you navigate the cost issue?
You know, there's the saying cheap is expensive, right? Because sometimes you'll go cheaper. Right, but there's a reason why we cost what we cost, right? And for the record, we were rated number 4 in the market for best value for money as an agency.
Congratulations.
Not the cheapest, but the best value for money by clients.
Nice.
And number 1 for original and effective creativity, and top 3 best performing agencies in the country. And we're rated number 2 most creative agency on the continent of Africa as well, right? Others are from Scopin, others are from Lurie's. Now, for us to achieve all of this, it means that the people that we have, right, are the best. And if you've got the best people, they cost money at the end of the day. But the thing is, what I am saying about our business is the type of outputs that our clients are also getting, right? So you can go cheaper, right? But the reality is that then you run a risk of, from a people and talent perspective, you might not get the best, as an example. So it's different strokes for different folks. You know, for us, we are results driven, right? And when it comes to, you know, the topic of pricing, right? It's, for me, what pricing is, or the sweet spot of pricing is, what are you willing to pay, right? It's how much the client is willing to pay, and matching what the client is willing to pay with what you do, right? And almost have a shared considerable outcome.
Okay. So you meet them halfway in a way.
We talk. It's a conversation, because
Yeah.
sometimes you may not want my Rolls Royce. It's not what you're trying to achieve, right?
Okay.
But what you are trying to achieve is
It's
X.
within a scope, and this is how
Correct.
much you can afford for it.
Correct. But I will tell you this, just as an entrepreneur now, that feedback from losses is exactly how we grew, right? So I'll give you an example. So we pitched on a very big bank about 3 years ago, give or take. We didn't win the pitch. And I set up a meeting with the CMO of that bank. And I said to him, I would like to understand, because we're very passionate. I mean, you know, we're very passionate about our work. You know, I'd like to understand, why didn't we win? And he sat down and he told me it was that, took notes, right? A year later, another bank came by. And guess what? A year ago, I'd lost a pitch, and I learned great lessons around the things that I did wrong in that pitch, right? And although the pitch was totally different, but we applied some of those learnings onto this pitch. And that's why today we are APSA's creative agency, their lead creative agency, right? How did that happen? It came from failure. All right, and it's learning from that failure and the weakness in the business at the time, you know, onto something else.
And you mentioned an interesting thing about talent and the team that you lead, and how it's so vital in running, you know, an agency of your magnitude, and that produces the quality of work that you do.
Yes.
If you were to break down how much talent acquisition costs you in terms of, you know, time, money, failed hires in some instances, and where do you find the senior talent, and how do you keep them?
Yeah. Look, I think for us, our big focus is brand. I'll tell you that, right? And why is our focus brand? Because when you've got a great brand, people want to work for you. That's the thing. It's not very hard to convince anyone to work for you. When people understand what you stand for, right? As soon as they get a call from my agency, we're a consideration. And it's the same with clients, right? It's making sure that brand is tip top. I mean, using recruiters, yes, that's there, but it's very expensive, right? So for us, if we are looking for someone, we will find that person.
Okay.
All
So
right?
you directly take it upon yourself.
Not me personally.
Okay.
you
Your
know,
management.
but my management team.
Gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha.
Why? Because everyone, you know, because they're very experienced and they've been in the industry for a very long time, so they know different people in different businesses, right? But at the same time, so there's two parts about this conversation. But at the same time, that works for senior talent, experienced talent, right? But to keep an agency sustainable, you need to almost mix it with your younger talent, you know, because you can imagine the type of salaries those guys are, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, your younger talent keeps you current, you know, because they understand
The trends.
they understand they know what clock it is. You know what I mean? Like our generation is still on another phase.
Right.
You know, they come with your fresher ideas. You almost need the balance between young and old. But to keep the business sustainable, right, in your project clients, your retainer clients, so the balance almost goes something like this. So your senior talent they would most likely be the ones that would come up with the idea, right? But your junior talent would be the talent that would execute those ideas. But when you look at the amount of weight that is lifted in terms of time, the idea generation phase, right, maybe that will take about 20-30% of your time, but your rollouts will take 70% of your time. Okay. That's where a lot of time
So you need
goes.
efficiency.
So then you need a lot of efficiency, right? But you can't do it with very expensive resources, or else you're not going to make a lot of money. So then you need your senior talent overseeing your more junior talent in rollout, not them doing it personally.
The actual work.
Yeah. And so that's why, going back to growth, it is a better idea to build top down than bottom up, because if you're too juniorized, you just it's going to be a circus
in this era. Yeah.
If you're too senior, you're just going to become outdated. A dinosaur.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You're going to be very clever, but you're not going to be very nimble. You're not going to be open to new ideas, etc. So it's from a talent perspective and a talent pool. It's just getting that balance right? And you need to be cool as a business.
And especially in the era of social media. But I, without running out of time, I do want to talk about funding, because this is a huge pain point for many, especially small businesses in South Africa. How did you fund Avatar's sort of like growth? I mean, you spoke a lot about how you managed, the retainer and the project model and how it still sustains you. But I mean, over time you've grown, tremendously. So I want to talk about, debt, equity, retained earnings, managing profit margins. What's been your real experience, going into South African banks, asking for capital as a black-owned business?
Yeah. Okay. So I think starting from Avatar, so my business partner Veli sold his house so that we could finance Avatar in the beginning.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. He just sold his house, and that's how we got them. And so I came with the clients from my previous agency, right? Yeah. And he came with the money, whilst those clients were taking off. Mm-hmm. But my experience is okay, let me talk about my industry and then how I overcame it, right?
Sure.
The challenge with advertising is that, again, we don't own land, we don't own machines, so in terms of assets, we don't have a lot of assets. Mm-hmm. And what do banks look for if they're going to finance you? Well, you've got to have assets, one, right? And number two, you've got to have the right cash flows, so okay, cool. So if you've got good cash flow, so you can pay the loan, and in the event that you can't, okay, there's something that we can take. Great. But in the case of advertising, you've got people, you don't have assets, right? And then, you've got money in the bank, right? But like,
what does that do? When the rainy day comes, and now what?
You know what I mean? So it's very hard to finance an advertising business. In fact, I was busy trying to do a very big acquisition, right? It would have made us the biggest ad agency in this continent, in fact, right? Had I done that acquisition. But where did things, go wrong? It's that very fact, where you've got a business with a brilliant bottom line, brilliant top line, but no assets, because of the nature of our business. Now, which means that, you would, more rely on your traditional funding models, like overdrafts, that type of thing. That's really what you can do, unless as the director, you are willing to put your house on the line, as an example to supplement the assets. Yeah. And, as a result of what we saw with the likes of Steinhoff, banks don't see shares as collateral anymore. They're not very valuable in their world. So it's very difficult to do those types of deals. So for me, though, I maybe now speaking to the more smaller businesses, how I overcame the funding challenge, because before Avatar, right? When I was still in my bedroom with my first business, right? So I was 17 years old. All I had was 2,000 Rand. But how did I scale that 2,000 Rand? It was through partnerships, right? So I went into partnerships with ad agencies where I serviced their clients. And so by servicing their clients, so I wasn't the front face. I used their infrastructure. I used their clients. I used everything that they had. So it was a partnership. Now I didn't need the money for extra computers. I didn't need the money for extra infrastructure because I was in a partnership with them. Right. And through that partnership, it eliminated the funding requirement. And on the upside of what I was doing, I was then able to buy my own computers and my own equipment, my own software, right? So, I have found, like even in scaling, going into partnerships with different businesses is actually the best way to actually avoid needing capital.
Yeah. That's a very interesting thing, because in the startup landscape, small business landscape, a lot of people say they acknowledge this issue with banks that you just can't get funding from them because your risk profile, understandably so, it's not worth it for them. But then there's a conversation about venture capital, about investors, angel investing, and that sort of thing. Was that not something that was of interest to you, or was it the specific decision that you took that you didn't need to go through that route? And so partnership just made more sense.
Look, I think for me, I've always had this theory in my head, right? Is that the day I open up equity to anyone else is the day that I believe that I cannot take the business any further. And if I'm going to open up equity to anyone, it's not going to be on the basis of money. It's going to be on the basis of value, of what they can bring to the table to take me to my next, right? Because the problem is money solves short-term problems. Then you are stuck with someone over the long term. You've basically, in my view, you've solved, a short-term problem.
But then you're stuck with the long-term issue.
With the longer term, And the person that you're with now might not understand your industry, etc., etc., etc. So for me, once there's another shareholder in there, that shareholder must definitely be able to provide value. So if someone said to me, look, this is what I have, and by going again partnership, by us coming together or me acquiring you, right, I'll give you money and okay, you can go to your next, but I come with this value that will create 100 million Rand here, 300 million Rand there. See, now that's a deal.
Fair. So you're not looking for someone to just dump money on you, and because now essentially you work for them. Because you have to somehow pay back that.
I could have done that a long time ago. Even whilst in startup mode, I could have done that. Because 100% growth year on year. Who doesn't want to become part of that, right? But I don't want to be stuck with a long-term problem. But I'd rather be with someone that can, again, help me get to my next.
And as we wrap up, I just want to talk about technology and future-proofing. You mentioned AI. It's sort of like become this huge takeover of industries, of economies in the world. No one knows where it's going, but it is here, and it's a technology that everyone has to adapt with. How are you using it, to future-proof your business and to find its purpose in your workflow to continue producing quality work for your clients?
Yes. Look, I think in the creative process, we've really embraced AI. Last year, we won a gold award for using AI in an ad, basically. So we created, this was for APSA, it was with Fifi Peters, where a clone of herself, and she was having a conversation with a clone, basically.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Have you seen that? Oh,
Yeah, I've seen it. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So we got a gold award,
Wow.
for that. And you can immediately start to see that our people are ahead of their time, right? But why it's important is because our clients themselves are asking asking questions around, how does AI fit into my business? We need to be the people that come with the solutions, right? And that's how we make sure that we are sustainable. But for that to happen, we need to create those investments ourselves. And that's why, we're building our own AI applications internally that make us more competitive against our competitors, and they make sure that we are sustainable, right? But in building those tools, why do we build them? Similar to the SAT example, it's to provide clients with more certainty around their marketing investments, right? And not that we've got a crystal ball and but we get it pretty close. Yeah. It's scary how close we are, from what we predict to what actually happens, right?
That's incredible.
Number two, it's also speed of delivery. What would have taken an entire day to do can be done in a minute. But does that mean that that person who was doing it in a day is out of a job? No. It's because someone still needs to look at what AI is producing.
Yeah.
Someone still needs to prompt it, right? Mm-hmm. So that it does what it does.
Yeah.
So you still need the artistic eye, because AI is not Picasso. That's the thing.
Or the human intelligence.
Correct.
Against artificial intelligence.
Correct. You still need to tell it that, no, red doesn't work. Try it in green. Mm-hmm. It doesn't know that, right? It doesn't understand feeling, etc., etc.
Right.
So it's about people. It's about upskilling our people internally so that they become very good prompt engineers. And that's the phase that we are in as a business, where we are co-creating with AI, everything from design to copywriting to how we plan our media, to production. We are in a co-creation process.
And my very last question, what does the next 3 years for Avatar look like in your forecasting?
That's interesting. Last year, had you asked me this question, I would have said we want to build a network of agencies, etc., etc. So I had an interesting trip, around the continent, and I realized the size of the South African advertising market and its sophistication versus, the countries that I was traveling in, right? That it would be very difficult for us to set up operations. But there are more mature markets like Kenya and Nigeria, as an example. I'd love to do something just in those two key markets.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is this informed by sort of growth, opportunity, a niche that's untapped?
Yeah. So if when we look at our creative performance versus our counterparts in Kenya and Nigeria, I mean, big ups to them. They're doing great work. But I think where we are, we can bring something new in those two particular markets. I think we just did a campaign now for AFCON. Right, where one of our clients I think they're one of the top 10 largest smartphone makers in the world, but the biggest on the African continent. So they were the main or one of the sponsors for AFCON. Yeah. And they gave us a brief to create an anthem for AFCON.
Okay.
2025. 6.
All right.
Yeah, 2025. AFCON 2025. Which we executed, so working with an artist by the name of Joe Boy in Nigeria, as an example. So we flew him down here, created the whole video, the dance moves, etc., etc., etc. AFCON approved it, client approved it, and bang, it flighted. Right now, for us to do that, it took a collaboration between our agencies in Nigeria, Morocco as well, where AFCON was happening.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to get all of that working in sync, right? We want to do more of that.
Okay.
We think that's where the next growth opportunity is, because we may have the ideas, but in terms of execution capability, you still need to partner with people on the ground. And I think the advertising market in those two countries is at a maturing state in that we can actually do something there.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Zibusiso. Really, really appreciate this. This was so insightful. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. All right.